Freedom of speech is something that I said at the top of the programme it has to be the cornerstone, the foundation of any fair, open and free society. We must have the right to scrutinise, criticise and question anyone. Speak openly about any subject. And that goes for people we like, and just as importantly, and this is what a lot of people don't get, it also goes for the people and the ideas that we don't like. In recent years, we've seen a dramatic shift in people's attitudes towards freedom of speech. This was once a cause that the left used to campaign for. Now, all of a sudden, if you're pro-freedom of speech, you must be a far-right, Nazi-loving extremist. I wouldn't consider myself one of those, yet I'm as vehement a supporter of freedom of speech as anyone. And I'm delighted to say here are two people who share that philosophy. Erin Edwards is co-founder of social media platform Float. She joins us from Texas. And Henry Widaz is a journalist here in the UK at the paper The Lancashire Post. Thank you to both of you for joining me. Firstly, Erin, to you, as an American, where freedom of speech is quite literally written into the constitution of your country in the form of the First Amendment, what are your thoughts on the current climate in the US when it comes to this topic?
It's pretty crazy just getting to, especially with midterm elections coming up. I think the hot word right now is hate speech, and people, it's like they're just throwing that freedom away, and they don't care unless it actually suits them. Case in point is this Alex Jones trial that's going on at the current moment. So freedom of speech is definitely pretty hot, but it's like nobody really cares, and if you do show support towards free speech at the moment, like you said, you're totally lumped into that category of a Nazi or, someone who's anti-freedom, and that just couldn't be further from the truth. So I think, like you said, you have to support free speech even when you don't like the person who is trying to speak their piece, even when you don't support their speech.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I'd support the freedom of speech of anyone, maybe with the exception of people calling for direct violence and conflict. But, you have to agree that freedom of speech has to be for everyone or it's for nobody. So,
Right.
Henry, you've been a journalist in the UK for decades. Have you ever seen a time before when what people say is so scrutinised and you can't comment on something, and one Twitter post can ruin an entire career or an entire life?
Yeah, I mean, this has been going on for, probably since Twitter, began. This woke mentality of, offending one person and then, someone else will react in an offended way, and then before you know it, there's a tidal wave and calls for a person to lose their job. Not in journalism, but just in any career. Within journalism, there's all my colleagues were battling a wave to, to ensure freedom of speech is allowed, so newspapers can cover stories and hold authority to account. And in my role as a branch chairman for the National Union of Journalists in Northwest Lancashire, we're sort of putting pressure on the union itself to make sure that the government, isn't allowed to silence debate, which is so critical for a fair society. Without that debate, you don't have established beliefs being able to be questioned, and those established beliefs might turn out to be wrong, as we're sort of finding out with the COVID injections. That more and more evidence is now appearing that these injections are actually not safe and effective, and they are causing harm, especially for younger age groups. So, yeah, the National Union of Journalists, from my perspective, will be looking to keep the pressure on the government. And one other thing, just before I finish, is to mention the online safety bill, which is going through Parliament at the moment, and that will further cripple the news in the mainstream, or the legacy news, if you like, and also in the independent news arena. So, yeah, I was part of a group called Holding the Line. We spoke to two MPs, Sir Christopher Chope and Mark Green, and they're both very concerned about this online safety bill. I think it's up to journalists to scrutinise that bill, which is 230 pages long, and then take it from there and pick apart what the the devil's in the detail, as it were.
Yeah, I would agree. There definitely seems to be a war on it, both sides of the Atlantic. As Erin pointed out, you've got the Alex Jones case, which definitely feels like a warning to the rest of the alternative media that this is what happens if you speak out. And obviously over here, because we don't have the First Amendment, this online harms bill, which is going to be put out as a, they're selling it that it will protect kids online when I highly doubt it will. It's just to censor the alternative media. Now, social media, Erin, has played a massive role in this, freedom of speech debate. We've seen a number of people fall victim to things, as I said earlier, that they may have said decades ago on Twitter being dragged up and used against them now. It's cost many people careers and so on. Now, as the founder of an alternative social platform, you obviously feel that social media done correctly, which is what you're trying to do with Float, can be a positive force for freedom of speech. So what are your aims with it?
Honestly, we're trying to build the tools for to empower users to moderate their own experience. I think that it's the nanny state of social media has really gotten out of control. And at this point, what we need to do is empower individuals to take responsibility online about what they post and what they want to see. And if they don't want to see content, if it bothers them, if it falls under the hate speech category, if, for whatever reason, if a piece of content comes across your screen that you just don't support, then we encourage you to handle it like an adult and block that individual and block to see that content. We're not your parents, and I don't think social media should be. So you need to be able to moderate your own experience.
Yeah, and they have freedom of speech when they want you to hear a certain narrative. I didn't see any censorship of the COVID jabs being promoted, for example, but anyone that questioned it, including a guest I've got later on today, Peter McCulloch, then you definitely get censored. Now,
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's, you can't pick and choose. You're either completely open or you're completely closed.
These individuals who spoke out against the COVID narrative during 2020, who are proven right when the Pfizer CEO took the stand and admitted exactly what they were saying, and now they're thrown off YouTube, or their Facebook pages got banned, or they got thrown off Facebook entirely. It's so sad to be able to watch them get caught up in their narrative and their digital identities be wiped away just because of something they said that ended up being true.
Yeah, and all those TV presenters and so on that peddled the propaganda, they're still in jobs and no one's holding them accountable for what they said.
Yeah.
Now, Henry, we both know, and I'm sure Erin will agree as well, that there's certain subjects, certain people that the media as a whole steer away from. Some people and some subjects are completely exempt from investigation and questioning. Have you had any first-hand experience of this through your career, for yourself or a colleague of yours, where you've gone to investigate something on the idea there's a free press and you've had that, that quiet word in your ear that it's probably not a sensible move to go there?
Possibly, yeah. And this, goes back decades. I've talked about this in the past. There's what you call editorial glass ceilings. And these glass ceilings don't just exist in journalism. They're all over the place, like taboo subjects, basically. And just going back to this online safety bill, part of that is protecting children, which obviously is a good thing. But there's also protecting. Part of it is protecting adults from harm, and it's basically very subjective. So, for example, if you talk to someone on the street about 9/11, a lot of people now might say, okay, yeah, fair enough. I'm aware of the huge holes in the official narrative. But for some people, just questioning that will cause them extreme distress. And, they'll want to run away from the person trying to have a dialogue with them. And, I was in that position myself not long ago. If someone spoke to me about 9/11 being an inside job or something of that nature, I'd want to run away because it went against my foundation beliefs. So this online safety bill could then be used to silence debate on 9/11. I've written stories in the papers that I've worked for about 9/11, questioning the science of how the buildings fell. So I've not had those resistances myself, but this online safety bill could restrict that debate. And 9/11, whichever way you look at it, is one of the key happenings of this entire century. For it not allowed to be debated, because someone might get offended by it or harmed emotionally by it, it's just a very dangerous avenue that we're going down, the thin edge of the wedge.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, it's only going to end one way, and it's going to end up with a Chinese-style system where you criticise or say anything that the government and the authorities don't want you to say, then you're going to have a blacklist on you, and you won't be able to work, and potentially you won't be able to buy a house. That sounds extreme.